Hey, well, thank you all for being here. My name is Kyle Biederwolf, and I'm the Professional Development Chair this year for YPA. I guess I just want to start off by saying thank you to everybody on this call. As we'll learn today, now more than ever, it's extremely important for us to step up and really make a strong impact in our community. We have a really great program planned for today with two different speakers covering two really important and really timely subjects. As we all learned how to work in the new normal of COVID-19, we took the month of April off from a lunch with leaders, but we're very excited to start rolling out an entire virtual programming schedule. This includes next Thursday, YPA will be hosting a virtual happy hour networking mixer, and we're gonna set it up that it's not gonna be like this, so it's not gonna be overwhelming if we have 30 to 40 people in one Zoom room. We're gonna break it out into breakout rooms and give you all opportunities to meet and network with people virtually, because this is the new normal. And also look out for more information about our next lunch with leaders in June. We'll be releasing information soon about that. And before we begin, I want to give one more special thanks to Rhiannon and Samuel, who I believe is on the call, for all of her help with this event as well. So we usually begin a lunch with leaders by going around the room and introducing ourselves. But however, because of Zoom, that's a little bit tricky. So what I would do is suggest that everybody goes and uses the chat feature at the bottom of the screen and introduce yourself, where you work, what you do, so everybody in the room has a voice and everybody knows who else is in the room. Additionally, please make sure to mute yourself. We don't need to hear you chewing on your lunch, and we don't need to hear you secretly playing with your dog under the table like I'm known to do. We will have a Q&A portion at the end of each presentation. But if you do have questions throughout the event, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll make sure that they get asked per the amount of time that we have. This is our first virtual lunch with leaders, so please bear with me as we as an organization also learn how to navigate the new normal. So let's go ahead and get started. And our first speaker today is Rodney Prunty of United Way of Central New Mexico. Rodney is a passionate, dedicated community servant with over 30 years of experience in the nonprofit sector, including 12 years within the United Way network. He began his employment at United Way as a resource development manager for United Way of Rock River Valley. And now he serves as the president and CEO of United Way of Central New Mexico. He is a family man, a community leader, and as I can attest to, because I ran into him at the gym before, an avid weightlifter. We are honored to be joined today by Rodney. So go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, I appreciate it. And thank you all for taking time to be together right now. I know it's certainly a challenging time for all of us, so it's just good to see most of your faces. I have also been known to black my screen out when I've been kind of COVID rough, if you will. So not saying that anybody on the call is having that situation going on, but for me, just talking a little bit more about my background. So I hail from the Midwest. So I was born in St. Louis. I didn't spend any real amount of time there growing up. I grew up in Rockford, Illinois, which is about 60 miles northwest of Chicago. And that's where I started my nonprofit career. And I think it's probably appropriate right now, as we just moved past the Mother's Day weekend, just to really share with all of you why I even got into this line of work anyway. And so much of it was because of my mother, who taught me to see the world as it should be, not necessarily as it is. And, you know, of course, that can be good and that can be bad. But you know, seeing the world as it should be really is what fueled my passion for wanting to do work in the nonprofit space, to be able to make a discernible difference in the lives of different populations. And so, you know, I started out working actually at the Boys and Girls Club. It was so long ago, it was still called the Boys Club. But I was doing program coordination there for young kids, doing a lot of different activities. And it was there that I was mentored by the branch manager of the club, who really believed in me, which was key to help drive me through my passion, my process of continuing to do work in that space. So I discovered that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to help people. I wanted to work to do what I could to improve lives. And so from there, my career spanned the gamut. I mean, working with a variety of different populations, and whether it was, again, at the Boys Club as a program coordinator. I was a preschool teacher for 6 years, believe it or not. So that's my education passion that I have. And then I've also worked in a variety of other spaces too. Most recently, before I got to United Way, I was a program director for an organization that provided support services for young mothers and young fathers, basically getting them resources for parenting classes, education support, kind of a wraparound case management service that was funded by United Way of Rock River Valley in Rockford, Illinois. And so I always tell people that I just remember I was at UPS, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and the United Way person was there giving the spiel about United Way and why it's so important to support community. And it was just kind of one of those watershed moments for me where I thought to myself, you know, if I ever get a chance to work for United Way, I'm going to jump at that opportunity, because something just really resonated with me around that message of creating change at scale and in a macro fashion, right? I mean, I was doing it micro, but how could we get bigger? How could we go community wide with this? And so actually the opportunity presented itself some 6 years later. And again, I came in, as Kyle mentioned, in resource development. So I was a fundraiser, even though all of my experience was on the community social service side, but that actually served me well because I was able to speak to folks and speak to their hearts because I had seen the actual results of their generosity, of their philanthropy. You know, the ones that make that conscious decision that I'm going to give of whatever resources that I feel I can to help people. I was on the other side. So I got to see that help get delivered. And so it was so much fun to be in campaign. I did that for a few years, about 3 years. And then I was promoted to vice president of that United Way. And then I moved to United Way of Racine County in Racine, Wisconsin, which is about 80 miles northeast of Rockford, right there on Lake Michigan, about 45 minutes south of Milwaukee. I was a CEO for that United Way for 6 years. We did a lot of work around community schools, helping to provide wraparound services for parents and students to create better educational outcomes for our kids, but also increase financial stability for adults living in that neighborhood. Did a lot of work around the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, and fundraising in different ways, leveraging digital technology. And then just last year, I was blessed with the awesome opportunity to be CEO of United Way of Central New Mexico. And, you know, folks say, well, how did you stumble into Albuquerque from the Midwest? And I always tell the story, did a family vacation 4 years ago. We drove across the country just to see the country, and we ended up in San Diego for a week. And then on our way back, we stopped off in Albuquerque. And it was just part of the route. And so as we're coming in, I just always remember we're on 40 and we're headed east, and we see the mountains and how the city sits in the mountains. And it was just like breathtaking to the whole family, actually. And we enjoyed our time here, enjoyed the food, the aesthetics, just the natural beauty of Albuquerque. And, you know, of all the places that we had seen, we just said, you know, if we could move anywhere, it'd be Albuquerque. And again, some years later, this opportunity presented itself. I knew the previous CEO very well, Ed Rivera. We rubbed shoulders quite a bit at the United Way Network level. So here I am. I'm so excited about the great work that we're doing. Even in the midst of this challenge, you know, Kyle's talked about the new normal and what we're having to embrace as we work differently, but it has been quite the experience. And I'm just humbled really by the tremendous philanthropy of this community. And, you know, when I think about why it's so important for the community and young professionals in general to come together during these times of crisis, I mean, that's when the measure of a community really shows itself. What is a community really made of when these kind of crises occur? And, you know, we have been, again, very fortunate that so many individuals and corporations have stepped up to say, how can we help the populations that have been so significantly impacted by COVID-19, you know, and it started with a partnership, a non-traditional partnership, quite frankly, with the Albuquerque Community Foundation. You know, in a lot of communities, community foundations and United Ways are competitive with one another. But that wasn't the case here. I mean, I struck up a relationship with Randy Royster almost immediately upon arriving here. And we were having conversations about what we could do better together anyway before this even happened. And so we thought, hey, this is the perfect time for us to join forces to create this fund that could get money out very quickly to those nonprofit organizations that are suffering in real time, whether it's due to lost revenue because of events or capacity, whatever it may be. We wanted to be able to be that support system for the nonprofits. And we stood up the fund. We each put a little bit of funding in the bucket, and then we raised an additional 400 and some odd $1,000 through local, individual, and corporate support for this fund. And to date, we've granted out in the neighborhood of about $360,000 to close to 65 to 70 local and then some statewide organizations to help with COVID-19 relief. And so the process happens very quickly. The organizations apply within 5 minutes or five minutes, within a week, they get the funding. The process is very quick. It's 5 minutes to apply. And so that's been very helpful. And then, again, the support of our donors. We had a donor group, and actually, it was a married couple and their daughter and their son-in-law. And the daughter and son-in-law, they're millennials, young professionals. And they actually, one of the gentlemen himself, I'll just say his name, Billy Gupton. You probably know Billy. Some of you do. He thought about this idea about how could we help both support restaurants locally impacted by this and then help people who are hungry. And so we started having a series of conversations, and we created the Feeding Families Fund. And so we identified 7 local nonprofits to basically provide who serve families in crisis. We raise funds to give them the funds to go to restaurants to purchase warm meals for these families who are in crisis or food insecure. And again, the generosity of the community was so tremendous that we raised about $180,000 in about 2 weeks to help stand up this fund. So now these 7 nonprofit organizations will be funded through July 1st to help provide these warm meals for families in crisis and food insecure families. And at the same time, local restaurants are able to stay afloat on some level. And in fact, we've heard from other local restaurants that have said, hey, we'd like to be part of this too. So we've actually broadened our partnership. We're looking at phase 2 to start after July 1, where we will also bring on more nonprofit organizations and provide funding to help support them too. So those are just some examples in terms of what we've done in the midst of this crisis. And I would say, whatever strikes your interest as a young professional, what do you care about? What is your passion? You can realize that, United Way, we see ourselves as an avenue for folks to realize their passions, no matter what they may be, whether it's philanthropic, it's more than just giving, it could be volunteering, but to always think about how can I help support what's happening in the community in the best way that I can. The thing I love about United Way so much is it's inherent in our name, United Way, united, right? And what it really means to me is to live that way, to actually live united, to live in unity means that, we figure out how we can make a difference as individuals in our community. Doesn't have to be huge or tremendous, but whatever we can contribute, we give what we can to help the greater good. And that's just what I just appreciate so much about United Way. And I see our organization as that channel to help, whether it's directly with us or with other nonprofit partners or with other organizations in the community, to be that conduit for folks to really plug into, to say, I want to be able to help. And, I see it as our job to be able to provide those opportunities where they are appropriate for folks to really plug in and find a way to help support our community. I mean, this pandemic has been more than disruptive. We're looking at kind of phasing in some of the processes of getting back to that new normal. But the reality of it is that, we're going to find ourselves, feeling the effects of this pandemic for years to come. And everybody knows that, everybody's heard that. And even as a United Way, we've thought differently about how, we can continue to be nimble and responsive and to act with speed when it comes to these critical crises where folks find themselves. And so for us, we just want to make sure that we're able to be nimble. Historically, we've been very process oriented. I like to say we make the sausage. So we start from here to here. It's a 6-7 month process from the funding to the actual getting to the agency. And, as you all have heard, we've dispensed with that totally. It's about speed and getting the money and the funds in the hands of those organizations so that they can help the people who need help the most. So I feel like I've rambled on a little bit, but please, I'll stop there. And Kyle, I'll turn it back to you to continue the discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Rodney. That insight was amazing. I'd love to open it up to any of the participants of this call. Are there any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question.
I have a question. So Lindsay Humphreys here from Junior Achievement of New Mexico. And I just want to say I'm a fellow Rockford, Illinois person as well.
Get out of town.
I know, it's crazy.
Wow.
I was just like, wait, what? But I would say, what was your biggest struggle throughout your professional career so far that you've had to overcome?
You know, I think it would take me back to when I was actually working for the organization in Rockford, actually, that provided those support services for young mothers and fathers. And, you know, certainly we've all experienced this in the workplace where there's been tension or friction or challenges internally, right? We've all experienced that. And it was a tremendous culture shift, first of all, for me to even become part of that organization, because I was the first male of a, you know, predominantly female run organization. And so, you know, it caused some consternation in folks because they started to believe, well, we've been doing this for so long, why is he here? And I would liken it to growing a rose out of concrete. So the internal politics and, you know, challenges that were swirling around me only fueled me to make me, I believe, more resilient. One of the things, again, I think that my mom taught me was to, you know, take every experience and draw a positive out of it. And so that was really what continued to help propel me in that way. So internally, that would probably be the biggest, the challenge that I've ever had in my career. Beyond that, you know, fast forwarding to a little bit now to present day, United Ways have struggled across the country in different places because of the relevancy of United Way, where folks say, well, what do you do? And, you know, you start to tell them what you do and their eyes glaze over. And so much of what we do gets lost because we do so much. And so that has been a challenge throughout my career. We've been working to overcome that. We've overcome that in certain ways. But the happy ending to that challenge is that more than anything else, this pandemic has really demonstrated that the rumors of United Way's demise were vastly overrated, because, you know, we were among a few organizations where folks reached out to say, hey, United Way, what can you do? How can you help? And one of the things that became clear to me is we still have that infrastructure to be able to respond to community crisis in real time. And again, I'm fortunate. I have a team that, you know, was used to working a certain way, but now they're working again with speed. And it's a little different, but it's also very exciting.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, Rodney, awesome work. Thank you so much for what you do. So I know in your role that you have a lot of, I mean, you've been dealing a lot with collaboration between private and nonprofits. And what I really wanted to know, as being a team leader and going through the transition you had to do to get real-time funding into people's hands, instead of a 6 to 9 month process you were talking about, how did your previous collaboration work when you're leading your team and getting them to be able to change focus and be, you know, the results and the metrics completely changed overnight?
So I would say, number one, even coming here and focusing so much on the culture of the organization, which as a leader, that's what you want to do. You know, there's that saying that culture eats strategy for lunch, or culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it's true. I mean, you can have the best laid plans, you can have a beautiful strategic imperative or strategic plan, but if your culture is not healthy, you will own whatever you accomplish will be in spite of, not because of the organization. And so for me, that started at the outset to really focus on strengthening the culture. And so the team became very accustomed to us just working differently, even up until this point. There were a number of different things that we had done that we had done with speed. And, you know, I look at it as my charge as a leader to make sure that I am able to engender the confidence of the team, so that, you know, again, I can say all day, hey, let's do this, but they have to execute, right? but part of that has to come with, this is someone that I want to actually follow. This is someone that I actually believe in what's coming out of their mouth. It can be better. And so I was fortunate enough to have that kind of mindset creep into the organization. And in some ways, too, I find that it was exhilarating to some of the team members, because you talk about the collaborative approach. We could have been doing a better job of that previously with being collaborative and, bringing that to the table. I think the Albuquerque Community Foundation was really the spark, because again, it's just, you don't see that happen very often, where you see United Ways and community foundations join forces. So I think that was kind of the catalyst for the team to say, hey, this is different. We're working with Albuquerque Community Foundation, and we're helping people in real time. And so it really just kind of had a domino effect for some of the other things that we did. For example, with the Feeding Families Fund. The other thing that I didn't mention is that we worked with Sandia National Labs to create a fund for the Native American population that's also been hit very hard with COVID-19. We called that campaign "The Need Is Now," and we're about, I think, $42 away from $250,000 being raised to help support the tribes and the Navajo Nation and the Pueblos. And so, but again, another example of the team, having that wind at their back, where it's like, let's go, like this is happening, and this is something that we haven't seen before, and it's being effective, it's working.
Awesome, thank you.
Love it, thank you.
I have a quick question, really quick. Thank you for being here, Rodney, first of all. Joseph Medina, I just wanted to ask you, if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, that's a great question. How young? I'm just kidding. Beginning of my career?
Professional, like in your 20s, mid to late 20s.
I would say, this is going to sound cliche, but it's so true. Don't sweat the small stuff. And I think sometimes we all feel this, where we may feel, slighted or take personal umbrage towards something, to the point that it can cloud your judgment or your capability to get work done. But I would say that would be the biggest piece of advice that I would give my younger self, because my younger self was certainly, again, very earnest, wanting to do the best that he could to help communities. But sometimes things could get under that guy's skin to the point where, it could be a distraction, and it didn't have to be, because, you think about the challenges where you find yourself, even right now, and what we're all experiencing, this too will pass, whether it's a year, 2, 3. And really the point to really take from it is, what can I, as a young professional or as a professional, derive from this experience? It's only going to make me better, right? So that would be it. Thanks for that question, by the way. It's a great question.
Thank you.
Oh, I have a question. This is Thomas McGuire. One of my questions is, what would you tell yourself, especially like when, we had kind of go through highs and lows, when you're feeling at your lowest? What would you tell yourself to keep going even when things aren't going as well as you hoped?
I've been there. It's almost the same philosophy, from the perspective of it's going to pass. But also, I think, and you may have seen this too, it's focusing on what I can control. I think when folks find themselves in challenging situations, sometimes you can feel as though, well, what can I really do to affect the outcome? Some things you can affect, but whatever you can affect is really focusing on that. So what can I affect as a professional? So that's what's helped me too. And I think, Kyle mentioned this earlier. This has also been very helpful for me, and my recommendation to all of you: do it on whatever level that works for you. But the physical, doing something in terms of fitness, you don't have to go to the gym for 3 hours like I do, although I haven't been able to do that right now. But being physical activity, it helps release, the endorphins in the brain. It also relaxes you, and it gets you to really center yourself. So, there were plenty of times where I'd find myself in a situation where I'd be down, or there's a big challenge that would be weighing heavily on me. And I'd go to the gym and I wouldn't think about it. I'd do the workout. And then at the end of it, without even having really processed it in my mind, I would have, oh, you know what? This is a solution. This is what I can do to affect the situation that I find myself in right now. So those would be some of the responses I would give to that.
Awesome. Are there
I
any
have a,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, quick one. I think it sort of parallels with what you were just talking about. But I don't know if you've run into the issue of burnout, especially with everything kind of going on currently, because I think some places have seen sort of cuts and things like that, and it's more pressure on other sort of parts in the organization. I don't know, as you've sort of dealt with what's going on and just things throughout your career, have you run into that, and how do you deal with employee burnout?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've dealt with it. I've experienced it. My team, of course, in different locations, they've experienced it too. And I think your leading question about there is a parallel to that. So it really is taking care of yourself first when you find yourself at that point where you are starting to burn out. I mean, you have to practice self-care in some way. Again, no matter what that is. I recommended fitness on some level, but that may not be attractive to everyone. But whatever it may be, whether it's meditation, reading, you need to be able to unplug at some point in time. Whether it's spending time with your family, but you have to be able to step back. And I think it's also important to recognize when you're experiencing that. A lot of times people don't even recognize it. They just keep going until they are completely burned out. And then what good are they to either themselves or the organization or whatever work they're trying to do? So I would say that would be key in that. And again, I've always had this, and this is just me personally. This is not necessarily an answer to the question you all have to embrace. But for me personally, it's just always been a sense of a strong belief in myself that I would be able to overcome any circumstance. And I've been blessed and been able to do that in most cases, not every case, but again, whenever you do have those setbacks, because remember, it's no such thing as failure, it's more of a lesson. Always look at it in terms of what can you derive from this, and to always be in that improvement mindset. How can we get better, even when it comes to burnout? So what am I doing that's burning me out? Is it the way that I'm even approaching work? Am I not managing my time appropriately? Do I have to go to this meeting? Can someone else go to this meeting? It's really thinking through those things too.
Yeah. Would you, I guess, and that's sort of on the personal side for motivating a team, if you recognize it, other ways I guess you would approach addressing it with team members?
Sure. Again, that is really focused on making sure that, as a leader, I provide them with the opportunities to be successful. So that means taking into account how can I, as a leader, lighten the load, or how can I help with this particular situation? As a leader, it's your job to move those big obstacles out of the way so that your team can be successful. You're not supposed to be sapping their energy. You're supposed to be zapping them, right? And don't be a sapper, be a zapper. So it's more about understanding what can I do to help alleviate the situation. So whatever the realm of authority that you have, whether that is, hey, you know what? I see that you're burned out. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's talk about your workload. How are you managing your workload? Look for ways to say, hey, you know what? Take off on Friday at 3 or noon or whatever, but to be considerate of the fact that people just need to step back. Not at the sacrifice of the effectiveness of the organization, but the organization's not going to stop or cease if you say, take the afternoon off, because I can see that, you're pretty much at the wit's end. And then really work to, how are we managing your workload? Do you need to come to this meeting? If you don't need to come to this meeting, don't go. Focus on whatever the tasks at hand are, and really focus on getting your team to understand how to prioritize their work. A lot of times people just try to do everything all at once without thinking about, what really takes precedent over the other.
Awesome. Thank you. And I think we had one more question, and then we'll move to the next portion. Anybody have a question?
Yeah, I have, oh.
Okay.
Wait,
Yeah,
Is there like
go
a
ahead.
schedule or something? Okay, cool. Hi, Rodney. So thank you so much for sharing that, especially with the Native American tribal assistance through Sandia. So my name is Chanam, and I work at Sandia Labs, and so I just wanted to let you know that from the ground floor, all of us were really excited about that to be able to contribute, and we all thought that that was a huge need. So thank you for bringing that up again. So I guess in general, my question is that right now it's really encouraging to see sort of this outpouring of generosity. And, you know, I guess the issue that I'm worried about is talking with some people in the nonprofit sector that there is still this worry that, you know, after all of this is over, that they're going to be dealing with this donor fatigue and, you know, still be missing out on all of these events that nonprofits have had to cancel and, you know, missing out on that sort of engagement with their regular donors that might be suffering as well. And so I'm wondering from your perspective, that sort of the center of all of this going on in central New Mexico, what insights you had as far as, you know, what the task looks like for keeping people engaged, you know, sort of after this initial wave of wanting to help is over.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thought. And I think, you know, we're having those conversations internally, really focused on everything that you lifted up. And I think for us as a United Way, it's both threading the needle to get folks to see that it's important for them to continue to support our long-term initiatives such as Mission Graduate. You know, we still want to make sure that our kids graduate from high school. Things will still continue to go on and be successful in post-secondary. We want to make sure that with Mission families, that families are stable, resilient, healthy, and have their basic needs met. But then also framing that with the immediacy of now. So I think for us, and we're having this conversation at a United Way network level, what does it look like for us moving forward? What have we learned? Again, back to the learning. What have we learned from this? How can we get better? What can we continue to keep? What can we leave behind? So thinking about how important it is for folks to give in real time, we've seen that it matters to people that if they can support something and they know that that support is getting to the people that need it now, that resonates with them. And then there's other donors that say, I'm perfectly fine with supporting Mission Graduate, Mission Family, because I can see the long view. Even though right now we're in the middle of this, there is still that long-term view we need to take. And so we're having those conversations, but, you know, we are definitely cognizant of that. We recognize that moving forward, we're going to have to think about what it looks like, because what will the new normal even be for United Way? So thanks for that question and the insight there behind that.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and then we'll have one more question. We'll send it over to Anne Marie.
Hey there, it's Anne Marie Henton with Albuquerque Economic Development. You'll have to forgive the wind. I'm actually out for a run. Speaking for now. Thinking about the future, Rodney, how can us young professionals show up for Albuquerque in the next 8 months, in your opinion?
I think we need you more than ever. And you've heard this as young professionals that, you know, you are the future. And so I think it really goes back to what I was talking about earlier. The best way to show up is to figure out, you know, where your passions lie and how you want to make a difference, and then plug in to that resource that will help you realize that. If you don't know, or you need some counsel or some direction around that, I mean, United Way, we'd be more than happy to help with that. Again, it's not even self-serving from our point of view, because it may not even be anything that we're doing, but I do, again, see our United Way as the organization that can connect you to what you care about. So I would say that'd be the best way to show up, because we certainly need all of you.
Awesome. Well, we'll give you, Rodney, a virtual round of applause, but thank you very much for joining us today. And I would love for you to stay on the call. But all of us really appreciate you sharing your insight and your leadership journey with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, now we'll go ahead and move on to the second half of our programming. And we are welcomed by Breanna Anderson on the call. She is a communications professional who has worked in the nonprofit, government, and private sectors. While still in college, she started her own career working as a radio news broadcaster. After graduating with a bachelor's degree in journalism, she went on to work in television news and marketing, and later acquired leadership positions as the head of communications for the Albuquerque mayor, and then head of communications for the New Mexico nonprofit Heading Home. That's actually where I had the opportunity to meet Bree, was when she was in that role. After Heading Home, she started her own business, A Biz by Bree, after becoming a mom and wanting to fulfill her desire to work virtually and providing communication support to multiple agencies. Her client portfolio consists of private, nonprofit, and public organizations. She is an energetic professional that strives to infuse innovation and creativity in every project that she's a part of, whether that's statewide health policy or small business marketing. At the end of the day, all of her work can be directly tied to making the world a brighter place for both her community and her family. To give us some tips and tricks about working from home from the pro, I would like to turn it over to Bree. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. Thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you to Rhiannon for writing the last bit of it, because it feels really weird to write about yourself in that context. So thank you for the assistry. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here with you guys so that you can kind of follow along with this presentation. If you can see that. Yay, okay, thumbs up.
Yeah, we can see.
Perfect. So thank you guys so much for having me. Part of the pieces that weren't in my bio, I was born in California, so I had a Valley Girl accent for the first 10 years of my life. I moved to Baltimore, Maryland when I was 10, and then we moved in the middle of my senior year to New Mexico. I met my husband, who is an engineer, in public speaking class, and we like to joke that together we have one brain. I'm like the creative writing side, and he's the math science side. So together we are complete. And don't tell our previous professors, but he totally tutored me in math, and is the only reason I was able to get through college math classes. And then in return, I wrote all of his papers up until his master level classes, in which case I was useless, pretty much. It was like editing a foreign language. I, as Kyle mentioned, started in journalism at KOB TV and did some radio work at KKOB as an anchor and reporter, and then got into marketing and into communication roles, and in 2017 started my own business. I have a couple of private and public clients. Currently the client that has really been working me is the State's Aging and Long-Term Services Department. As you guys can imagine, their work is critical right now, and public information, while it has always been important, for those of us who are in communications, you are probably like me in that it's kind of crisis mode every single day. And I know a lot of you are ambassadors and messengers for your organization. So the distribution of communication is not just falling on those of us who are communications professionals, but it's kind of falling across the board on all individuals within the organization. So I have some tips and tricks that I want to share with you, but just kind of like a precursor that this is not normal. Even for those of us who have been working virtually for the past, few years, like myself, this is still not normal. My normal was I would drop my son off at school and I would plug into a coffee shop that was right down the street. I felt really productive when I was surrounded by people who were also working and, had their laptops up, and that environment and those options are obviously not available anymore. So if you're feeling really uncomfortable that this is not normal, please know that I feel you, and I think everyone does. And we talk a lot about creating a new normal. And hopefully some of these tips and tricks will help you do that in your life. And maybe there are some pieces that you could take into the future, even when you're back in your office space, your formal office space. I think there are some tips that translate to that environment as well. But not all of these tips and tricks are going to be compatible with you or your work, or just might not be useless or useful for you. So take and leave what you can, take what's helpful for you in your situation, and leave what isn't. And there are some pieces in here that I have not even, done for myself because they just weren't really compatible with me. And some of this is going to be repetitive to what Rodney has talked about and spoke about so eloquently. It was kind of intimidating, Rodney. I was like, oh, I have to follow that.
Hey, Bree, real quick, I just want to let everybody know that on the side in the thumbnails that you're looking at, you can have the option to minimize it so it doesn't interfere with her presentation. So you can make it just Bree or all 4 little options. Just a quick tip.
Thank you, Kyle. Yeah, I don't want to be like a 2-inch by 2-inch little box because you probably won't be able to read what's on the screen. So creating your efficiency environment and perfecting your home office. This is something that I usually had kind of like a mobile home office. Like I said, I would work out of coffee shops a lot. And so I already knew the tools and comforts that I tried to bring with me in my Mary Poppins bag of my office supplies. So these were easy for me to incorporate into my home office. Some tools which are pretty standard, and you guys probably already do this, but just having your planner or calendar nearby, or if it's digital, obviously you don't have to bring one, it's on your computer. Having a notebook, I am obsessed and slightly addicted to writing checklists. So I always have a notebook nearby, just in case it's not convenient for me to type it into my computer, or if I'm better organizing my thoughts that day on paper, which it varies for me. Some days I'm all paper, some days I'm all computer. I don't know how to explain that, just part of me. And then having obviously pens, sticky notes, highlighters, chargers, all of those things within arm's reach so that you can plug in if your battery's running low. If you really want to, draw attention to something, highlight it. And then the comforts. So these are kind of the things that employ your 5 senses to really get into your efficiency zone. So I don't know about you, but if my lips are chapped, it drives me crazy. Like I can't explain it. It just drives me nuts. And on all the Zoom calls, I'll be like biting my lips, trying to it's just bad. It's not a good look. And so I would suggest carrying chapstick with you and having it with you in your office space, as well as your handy dandy water bottle, so that you can hydrate. I realized the other day that I went a full 8 hours without drinking anything, and that's not healthy, not good for you. So make sure you have your water, and you can kind of counterbalance your caffeine intake. I am a tea person, so they joke about my meetings because my thermos always makes an appearance in every Zoom meeting that I have. Headphones. Studies have shown that if you have some music playing in the background, that can really help manage your blood pressure, and can really help you crank things out. So this is kind of funny and a little bit embarrassing, but if I'm doing some creative writing pieces, or if I'm writing talking points, I tend to turn on like instrumental classical music. I can't do anything with lyrics, otherwise I literally start typing what they're singing. And if I am like really trying to be super responsive and just like bang through a bunch of emails, I turn on instrumental techno. Just my thing. So if one of those works for you, you can kind of gauge it based on how productive or short and sweet you need to be in your communications or tasks that you need to accomplish. I also have snacks. I read this and it just stuck with me back in college when I was pulling all-nighters trying to get papers in on deadline, that apples have some kind of, and if anybody's in the health world, feel free to chime in, because I don't know what I'm talking about and I could be totally like giving you bad information. But that said, I read that apples have like a natural caffeination type effect on you. So my go-to snacks are always apples, almonds, and some dark chocolate. Mints or gum, peppermint is also really helpful for me to kind of like stay awake and stay alert. And then scent, like we said, engaging all of those senses. And this is a Rhiannon edition. So thank you so much for this. I had not even thought of this. But she has a candle that she lights every time she starts to work. And I thought that was such a good idea because I get writer's block so often. And I think, you know, you can have like those foods that you eat to kind of help sustain you and get you the energy you need, but the scents also can really help you for tapping into like your creativity or just kind of engaging your mind that, hey, now it's time to write, now it's time to do this. And so having that scent association can be really powerful. And we talked about music with the headphones. So productivity, determining the environment in which you are the most efficient. Consider having a designated workspace and think about things like noise and temperature. Some people work really well in cold environments. That's why a lot of employers are usually blasting the ACs to keep their employees awake and alert. For me, I get too busy shivering that I cannot concentrate because I'm like, I need blood flow. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure my feet are going to be frostbitten by the time I'm out of this office. So think about what works for you. You know, you can really customize your workspace now that we're all working from home. And noise. And this might not be achievable by everyone. I have a 4-year-old, and so filtering out noise, especially when I was working from home and my husband was still going into work for about 50 days after COVID first hit New Mexico. I was quarantined with my 4-year-old, trying to work 10 to 12-hour days for my clients. It was near to impossible. But one of the things that is a really great thing to have is peace and quiet in your workspace. So if you can, you know, if you're not limited by your dogs or your children, I guess your fur babies or your actual babies, try to find a space where you're not in a main like traffic zone in your house, and try to schedule personal / home activities so that those demands don't interfere with your work schedule. So for example, I try to set like a 30-minute window around lunchtime where I can get up, walk around, kind of take a little breather, and just trying to make those a priority. I know Rodney talked about working out, and like he said, if that's not your shtick and you want to do something else, just schedule it in so that you make sure you actually do it. And I feel like when my little calendar sends me an alert that, you know, here's the next meeting I need to go to, or I need to take a snack break or walk break or something, it's more top of mind. And I'm like, okay, I really do need to unplug and physically remove myself for a little bit. Mix it up. I know Anne-Marie was participating in this meeting while going on a walk, which is one of my recommendations. If you can participate in a meeting while you're taking a drive. My mom takes care of my son and watches him. Yes, I broke into my parents' quarantine. We call it Fort Cox because their last name is Cox. And I convinced the warden to let me and my son in because I was losing it. So I do a Zoom meeting every morning as I'm driving to my parents' house. So if you have a Wi-Fi signal and can plug into that, or if you just kind of want to take a little cruise and get out, gas is super cheap right now. So have your Zoom meetings on the road. And then return your phone calls like Anne-Marie while you're on a walk. Set up your laptop or tablet on a dresser or a high table in order to have a standing desk. I have ghetto rigged laughably several standing desks so far. One was made out of boxes from Costco that we needed to recycle. and the other was made out of a step stool, but it rocked. So it was kind of like, I think I gave some people motion sickness if my camera was on, because it was constantly moving while I was talking and on camera. But if you don't have a standing desk and either don't want to buy one or can't afford to buy one, ghetto rig it like me, MacGyver it. No one's judging you. And then another option is grab an extension cord and head outside. It is prime allergy season, so that is a downside to being outside. We live in the valley, so I'm constantly like waving cotton out of my face, and those, I don't know if they're elm or cotton little seed pods, but those just get everywhere in my hair. They're all over. But if you can, and if you don't live in the valley and aren't subject to cotton snowstorms in the middle of May, do it, because it is nice to kind of have that little change of scenery. So this is a quote that one of my former bosses told me when I was getting ready to embark on my next chapter and next adventure. She said, "You bring you with you wherever you go." And so I don't know if that's comforting to you guys, but it was for me, because it's like, even though I'm not in my accustomed social settings or the environments that I'm used to, I'm still me. And so I need to figure out ways where I can how should I say it, where I can feed that part of me, you know, still engage in the activities that feed my soul. I'm a very social person, and so quarantining for me could definitely drive me a little crazy. And I need those social engagements. I know some people are like, don't want to have any more Zoom meetings. They're Zoom meetings out. But for me, like, seeing my friends and coworkers on Zoom is really helpful to me, and kind of just gives me a little boost. But other things you can do is wear comfortable clothes. If you're doing a presentation like today, swap in a dressy top. Rodney, are you wearing pants? I read his lips. He said yes. But the pant industry is actually currently super, like, they're really suffering right now. There is no demand for pants. So you can put on a dressy top and, you know, male or female, put on a dressy top and look business on the top. Schedule breathers. Try to have time where you can unplug, walk away, just give yourself some perspective, and you'll be surprised, if you don't already do this, how you can think of things that you wouldn't think of when you're still sitting in your office environment. Coordinate video chats so you can still engage with coworkers, friends, and families. For those who have Zoom fatigue, maybe this isn't a good tip for you, but we have a family game night weekly, and it's just kind of a fun way to use the professional platforms that we've you know, been forced into using to have virtual meetings, but use those to still connect with family members and friends and coworkers. You know, I had the people, when I was in an office space, I had that handful of people that I knew I could go to them and, you know, just pick their brain for a few seconds. Or if I was having writer's block, I could walk over to their office and say, I'm struggling with this. And that collaborative nature of doing business has changed to where it now needs to happen virtually. So try to make time for that, and be considerate of the fact that, you know, since you don't have your office mate or someone right next door, how can you still tap into that friendship and that creative energy? Infuse your work with personal connections and use your network. So one of my main clients, like I mentioned right now, is the Aging and Long-Term Services Department. And Rhiannon has been subject to some of my crowdsourcing efforts. Collaboration is so incredibly important right now, because we're all doing things that we either have never done before, or we're expanding on our duties and things that are being assigned to us. And so I've kind of formed a habit around, you know, if we're having a problem within the Aging and Long-Term Services Department, I kind of put together something, put it out in my stories, and try to tap some movers and shakers in the community that I think might be able to help me brainstorm solutions and crowdsource those solutions, and really utilizing your network. At the same time, of course, you have to have that balance. So be honest with yourself, your coworkers, and your employers about how much you can take on. And I know, talking about drawing boundaries, especially during a global pandemic, is, you're probably looking at me like, yeah, Breanna, that's not really possible. But as much as you can, try to establish those boundaries. And Rhiannon will recognize this quote. We were trained and taught to under promise and over deliver. And so that's something that I think that's a tool that we all can use in our day-to-day, and making sure that we're not overextending ourselves, because then the quality of our work is really going to suffer. And have grace for yourself and your coworkers. This kind of goes along with being honest. You know, if your coworkers have a super yappy dog, if they're like me and they have a 4-year-old who wants to come on to every conference call and say hi and tell people that he loves them, let them, and extend them some grace in that these are just extraordinary times. So speaking of my 4-year-old crashing my Zoom meetings, this is a photo that I posted on my social media. I was logging onto a Zoom meeting, and my son, as is normal, was crawling all over me. And he says, "Smell my feet," as soon as I queue up the Zoom meeting. And I said, "Bree, here for my Zoom meeting." My son then proceeded to say, "Hi, toilet butt crack banana peels," and farts loudly, and started laughing uncontrollably. I then was frazzled to see if we were on mute, and we were not. If you have had any Zoom meetings with me other than this one, because thank God for my mom, and childcare, he was regularly crashing my meetings. He also is at a phase where he is enjoying using what we call potty language. And so we have a rule that we have enacted that if he has potty language that he feels compelled to say, he has to go to the bathroom to say them. So now it sounds like he kind of has Tourette's, because he will run into the bathroom and start screaming all sorts of words and vocabulary that I am just really proud of as a mom. So this goes along with the grace. Normal is unattainable, guys. Like this, we talk about trying to establish a new normal. I really feel like normal is a high bar right now. But if we have good boundaries, if we're giving grace to others and to ourselves, and we have some COVID comedic relief, we will get through this. If you are missing this COVID comedic relief, feel free to follow me, because my son is just endlessly providing me content for that. And others, you are welcome to laugh at me for all the things that is happening inside our household. As far as your time, try to create a schedule and stick to it. Like we talked about, use your calendar feature or planner to manage your time, projects, or checklists. I generally schedule out, smaller jobs for like 30 minutes. I put it on my calendar. No one else is in that meeting with me. It's just me trying to get something done. But it really helps to kind of schedule out my day and use up those little time blocks. Schedule breaks to clear your head, like we talked about, kind of having some place where you can escape for a little bit. Set your agenda and set expectations so everyone knows what to anticipate in your meetings. I've seen this over the past, gosh, I guess it's been 2 months now, that it's really helpful if the meeting lead kind of sets the agenda and says, you know, this is going to be a brainstorming session, so we can all just kind of like popcorn bounce ideas off of each other, or this is going to be an execution implementation meeting where we just need you to pick up the ball, run down the field, and get it done. Or we're just touching base and just need to have some kind of quick update. Or if it's all three, just kind of breaking those things up so that we know what to expect. And, you know, when you're having those meetings, people know that they need to come to the meeting with solutions, not more problems for you to solve. So I think that's it for me. And I was not reading the chat, so if questions popped up in there, I can scan through. But Kyle, where'd you go? Or Breanna?
Yeah, I think Kyle had to jump off, so I'll facilitate any questions here.
Perfect.
I didn't see any others pop up in the chat, so yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask.
Awesome. Answered all of them.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. So we do have another virtual event coming up next week. We're going to have a virtual happy hour next Thursday night. I believe we're going to do that from 6 to 7:30. So we're going to do that on Zoom. We're going to do a couple of just breakout sessions. We're going to put everyone into smaller rooms that some of our board members will just kind of facilitate discussion and networking there. We also partnered with a couple of our partners to offer some drink kits and spirits for that event. We're going to be doing some giveaways with them on social media as well, so stay tuned to our social media channels for that. We're going to be featuring shrub cocktail kits from Mtucci's, and of course you'll need spirits to go along with that, which our friends at Safe House Distilling are selling right now as well. So we'll hope to see y'all then, and thanks everyone for joining us today.